Lesson 6. The Library of the Dead. Hidden beneath the shadowed canopy stood the Moon Oak Athenaeum, a building so old that no living scholar could remember its construction. It rose among colossal trees like a pale blossom emerging from the forest floor, its walls fashioned from smooth white stone. Visitors approaching the library often felt they were entering a sacred grove rather than a repository of books. Unlike the fortresses and halls of lesser races, the library seemed almost weightless. Tall lancet windows stretched from floor to ceiling, their frames twisting into shapes reminiscent of branches and roots. Delicate balconies circled the upper levels, suspended by graceful arches that appeared impossibly thin, yet had endured centuries of storms. Dark ivy climbed the walls in intricate patterns, guided by ancient enchantments rather than nature's whim. At night, tiny motes of blue-green light drifted among the vines like wandering stars, illuminating carvings that depicted the history of the altar loom. The carvings shifted subtly with the seasons, revealing different stories to attentive visitors. The doors were fashioned from moon oak and bore no handle or lock. Instead, they opened at the touch of one seeking knowledge in good faith, while remaining immovable to those who entered with greed or malice in their hearts. Within, the library spiraled upward around a vast central atrium. Living trees grew through every floor, their branches supporting walkways and reading alcoves. The elves believed the library itself possessed a measure of awareness. Books misplaced upon its shelves would find their way home overnight. Lost visitors discovered the knowledge they needed, rather than the knowledge they had come seeking. Every corner whispered of ancient wisdom, preserving centuries of lore gathered by generations of elves who believed that knowledge, like the forest, should be nurtured and allowed to grow. For 1,000 years it stood watch over the wisdom of ages, a sanctuary where knowledge was tended with the same reverence that elves reserved for the oldest trees of the world, until the fire came. The legend shifted. It had not died, as if protected by some powerful magic. The library itself had become a ghost. The librarians remained, but spoke in riddles no one understood. Without their help, one couldn't read the books or maps. This was the mystery the knights hoped to solve. Back at the Lungerford camp, days were spent discussing the possible locations of the famed library and paths to it. Tharsis the Fae refused to sleep so near the village, and she disappeared into the forest at night. But true to her word, she returned, bright-eyed and full of stories. Rook privately told Lord Felix he suspected one of the groups Tharsis had directed to the library was their own lost king. Lord Felix took this under advisement. As I noted previously, other squires and companions soon arrived. Sirius, Ubla, Slowblink, Brother Marcel and Zemina rode in. After their tough journey, Lord Galindo set them to fixing the structure and adding a roof, making the ruined building more habitable. You'll soon see why that's important. In the moors south of the forest, hidden from prying eyes, a lone building held a meeting of scurrilous rogues. A vengeful dwarf and an ugly scarred man pointed at a map, and through the pipe smoke explained their plan to a band of filthy cutthroats. When the knights eventually set out for the library, Tharsis only accompanied them to the first fork along the clear path. There she gave directions, plus a stick she claimed was magical and would help them find their way.
Once you cross the gorge, do not linger, but forge on due north. The plants often confuse mortal minds, so take care and use the wand I gave you.
Sure, even I dare not approach the lair you so foolishly seek.
Approach at midday and you may achieve the task which I have set. On you go.
Now we turn to the scribe's record of those events.
True to the fairy's advice, the company came to a mist-shrouded glade. On the far side stood a tall but ruined elvish structure, pale blue and somehow translucent. Inside, ghostly figures moved, but there was a twinkling ruby glow there too. The ankle-deep mist swirled, though no wind could be felt. The eddies moved about slowly, as if they had a will of their own. An unnatural hush prevailed. Galindo and Sir Arturo advanced quickly on the left flank of the ethereal elven library, towards something of interest that had caught their eye. Meanwhile, Felix, Dankworth and Tempest ventured out to the right of the library.
Dankworth, take that flank. Rook, you know what to do. Cover us.
The fog wisps floated about, but were suddenly drawn toward Tempest, Arturo and Galindo. As they neared, they coalesced into ember wraiths, enraged wraiths apparently created by the power of ember gems. Iago and Alfonso the dog raced toward their nearest companion, Don Arturo, to provide support. Meanwhile, Rook closed on the ember wraith that was after Tempest. The elf's attack was unsuccessful, and he took a minor gash for his troubles. A flask on the ground was once owned by an evil wizard who was tired of his foul minions stealing his drink. He was also paranoid and feared poisoning, so he enchanted his flask to set off a thundering blast if anyone but him touched it. Tempest triggered the trap, causing a large thunder wave, catching everyone in the vicinity. Dankworth and Tempest took the brunt of the explosion, with Felix, Rook and the Ember Wraith avoiding any damage.
Well, that hurt.
Galindo swung his blade at the Ember Wraith, but the undead creature evaded and dealt the noble knight a hefty blow with his spectral but still dangerous weapon. With Iago and Alfonso creating a distraction, Don Arturo expertly attacked the other Ember Wraith, and his critical hit caused the undead creature to dissipate back into a wisp and flee. With the threat gone, for now, he reverted back to his exploration and found a treasure chest. Using his incredible strength to open the chest, he found light armor of brightness. Now the company knew the danger. They were undead in the mist, and they could not be permanently dispersed. On the other side of the clearing, Felix, with Tempest screeching loudly, confronted the other remaining Ember Wraith, but the powerful knight took a minor wound. Seeing his own blood only provoked Felix to greater efforts, and his flashing blade vaporized the phantom. An Ember Wraith assailed Tempest, but the Firehound sunk his beak deep into the undead creature, shaking his head side to side until the wraith returned once more to a fog cloud. Another fog wisp was drawn to Galindo's life force, materialized into an Ember Wraith and lunged at him. Despite being outnumbered, the wounded knight fought off the vengeful ghost. The second Ember Wraith assaulted Galindo from the other side, but the flamboyant knight was ready, his stout blow scattering the wraith back to cloud form. Iago and Alfonso joined Galindo in the melee and were able to dispatch the remaining Ember Wraith. With the danger quelled for the moment, Dankworth and Rook proceeded toward the library.
Aye, my lord.
Unfortunately, the fog soon thickened, making movement sluggish for our intrepid heroes. Don Arturo made his way toward the library, overcoming the thick fog thanks to his immense strength. Galindo also overcame the thick fog as he continued to explore, finding a valuable glassleaf herb. The powerful Felix was not held back by the thick fog either, and made his way to the library, together with Tempest, who bounded through the miasma with ease. A fog wisp was drawn to Felix, and coalesced next to the mustachioed knight. Slowed by the heavy mist, Iago and Alfonso struggled in the direction of the library. Dankworth came to his master's aid and flung himself at the Ember Wraith. In the ensuing melee, both took wounds. The Ember Wraith returned to a vaporous form, but Dankworth succumbed to his blood loss. As Rook reached the library, he heard strange mumblings from the closest ghostly but benign librarian. Remembering his ancient lore, the mumbling revealed a clue. Past hidden paths few living know. What could it mean? Witch's Breath Fern had pale blue-grey fronds, constantly shedding a cold mist. Inhalation numbs the lungs and stiffens the diaphragm, making breathing shallow and painful. Victims often collapse, conscious but unable to draw air. Felix disturbed the plant, but fortunately the brave knight was not affected. The fog thinned, so Galindo entered the library and focused on a different librarian to decipher another clue. Where thorn and root together twine. More clues were needed. The company saw that the librarians were peaceful and the wraiths could not enter the library. Don Arturo made his way into the library also, and thanks to his ancient lore training, was able to translate the mumblings into "a silver treasure waits to shine." Felix joined the companions in the library, but was unable to interpret anything from the mumblings. Fortunately, the elf archer Rook was better versed in this ancient elven language, and determined the final clue was "across the stream's unbroken flow." That must mean that grove on the other side of the river. Meanwhile, a fog wisp closed in on Alfonso and turned into an ember wrath. Iago moved to protect Alfonso, swiping with his sword, but unable to land his blow. Tempest launched himself at the ember wrath and tore it back into wisps of fog. On the far side of the library, the fog congealed into a mass of lesser ember wraths, an ember swarm. Galindo and Don Arturo headed toward the river, with the blonde man-at-arms stopping to explore. He found an amber nugget with an insect trapped inside. Felix raced over to the river, whilst Rook remained at the library, enthralled by the shining ember gem. The elf muttered some words, and the gem lit up. The giant ember swarm advanced on the heroes. Rising out of the wispy fog, zombies appeared on the far side of the river. Galindo and Don Arturo combined to attack the ember swarm, inflicting some damage. Felix charged into the river's cold water, but thanks to his magical fish glass, traversed the strong current with no difficulty at all. Tempest followed his master, but was some way behind. An ember wrath materialized behind Don Arturo, whilst the ember swarm attacked Galindo. Despite his wounds, the knight defended well, and the swarm took more damage. Iago suddenly felt an inspiring surge of inner strength. Who knows from whence it came? Felix reached the far bank and entered the grove of trees, quickly finding the treasure, a silver key. Looking closely at it, he read, "Knowledge is the key." A zombie emerged from the trees behind him. Don Arturo attacked the ember swarm and pushed it away. Iago, full of energy from his recent inspiration, stabbed at the ember wrath, with both him and the wraith landing hits in the tussle. Iago attacked again, but was repelled. Meanwhile, Galindo, spotting an opportunity for his magic, launched an empowered fireball just behind the ember swarm. The fiery explosion incinerated the lesser undead, and the swarm dissipated. With his focus on the swarm, Galindo was surprised by an ember wrath, but the dark-skinned knight countered, his thrust vaporizing the undead creature once more. Tempest gnashed at an ember wrath, causing heavy damage and pushing the phantom back. On the other side of the river, the zombie flailed at Felix, who forcefully parried and dispatched it with a slash of steel.
Torero, watcher of the stars, guide my blade!
A nest of giant white monstrous fairy centipedes was disturbed, and they began to emerge from their lair. Galindo explored and found some gold and jewels underneath a rotten tapestry. Felix crossed back over the river with the silver key, heading back to the library. It looked like things were in hand for once. A centipede closed in on Alfonso, while the remaining ember wrath moved toward Tempest. Tempest lunged at the wraith, the creature turning to mist and fleeing again. Iago moved to join the fray with the centipede alongside Alfonso. Tempest looked around and flexed. Unexpectedly, something in the air lent a frenzy to the evil creatures. Galindo attempted to skewer the centipede. After all, it was no bigger than a giant rat, but he was instead brought to the ground by the frenzied creature. Don Arturo, shouting a battle cry for his downed friends, hacked the giant centipede to bits. Felix raced back to the library with the silver key. By presenting it to the librarians, they knew to trust their secrets with the knights. Here were people who valued knowledge. The fight was over. Don Arturo helped Dankworth up. He was fine. Iago looked concerned while leaning over Sir Galindo. Rook came over and attended. It was a bad wound, one which wouldn't heal quickly. The company entered the library, where the wraiths could not follow. With the silver key, the adventurers could solve the riddle of the librarians. The ghosts explained that the power of the Ember Gem had mixed with the magic of the library, not letting it simply burn away. It returned every year. In fact, the spirits of people who died nearby, mostly adventurers, were also dragged along, becoming the Ember Wraths and zombies in the nearby fog. While the librarians were only too happy to share what the books and maps said, they asked that the knights take away the Ember Gem. It would allow them to rest, and especially send the other undead onto whatever destiny awaited them. Rook was strongly in favour of this. So, after spending an unusual afternoon pointing at books, asking for passages, and trying to recreate maps from the ghosts' descriptions, the group had an idea where they were and what was out there. They learned more about the monsters and enemies of the High Elves. They also learned that Ember Gems are pieces of a great machine, a relic engine almost completed before the fire came. A blazing comet had plunged out of the sky and exploded over the forest, destroying the relic engine and scattering its pieces far and wide. These were Ember Gems. Now the company had one. The trip back was slow, with a limping Galindo, but they knew their way. Imagine their surprise when they saw thick black smoke rising from their base.
With the help of Tharsis the Fae, the knights found the Library of the Dead and gained their first Ember Gem. By taking it with them, the library, its attendants, and the undead were laid to rest. Nevermore would the library return. This ends the first classes on the quest of the Library of the Dead. In the next set of classes, we will learn the quest of the Lost King. Thank you, goodbye, and come back soon for more Tales of Redhollow.